Well, as we get into the afternoon here, we're in session 5D. Welcome to that. Looking forward to this one. The title is Data-driven Reinvention, and the subtitle is Leveraging Data to Create Enterprise Business Value at Scale. Important words, all of those. Now, the person that's going to be moderating the overall session here is Joe Depa from Accenture. I'll let Joe introduce himself and the panel members. But before that, I was asked to actually put a slide out here up front. So let me see if I can kind of share my screen real quick and put this, let's see, share screen. It's this one. Share. All right, so hopefully everyone sees that. It's maybe Joe, it's something you can speak to as well as you're busy introducing yourself in the panel.
Yeah, no, happy to, Derek. Thanks so much for hosting us, and thanks to MIT for having us. I'm Joe Depa. I lead our global data-driven reinvention practice at Accenture, and we're focused on using data and AI to drive value, which is the title for today's session. Look, I wanted to make sure that we also talk today about Walgreens. And so some of the work that Walgreens is doing is really, really fascinating work. And so I'm excited to be here with my friend and colleague, Mike Maresca, who's the Global Chief Technology Officer for Walgreens Boots Alliance, and Surekha Durvasula, who is the Data and Analytics Global Platform Lead from Walgreens. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to share a little bit more about what Walgreens is doing in the data and analytics space. If you think about Walgreens, they are the largest, they have the nation's largest health and well-being loyalty program, which you may not know. And they've also got access to 9,000 retail stores. So both of those two data points create an environment for lots of good data and analytics work that we're going to talk about today. So before we do that, what we wanted to do is just set a little bit of level setting on what you're seeing on the screen here. And this is some initial sort of survey work that we've just recently released. I haven't quite yet released, I should say. We've got special permission to release to this audience here. And it's survey work that we've done with both MIT and Accenture. And we looked at what's going on in the marketplace, which is, as many of you know, AI adoption has seen massive shifts in the last 12 months. And I think we all remember when AI used to be a CIO or CDO agenda item only, right? Just even 12 months ago, let's call it, or maybe 24 months ago. But now it's really has moved to be a CEO and boardroom priority. And frankly, one of the top priorities for our CEOs. And so the key question that we're helping our clients with is, how do I go from pilot to scale and get true value and true outcomes, right? And so that's something Mike and I talk about often is, how do I do things like improve my customer experience? How do I improve the way I make decisions, right? Improve operating efficiency, or create new products and services with AI. That's becoming a very, very hot area for us. And so those are some of the key topics that we're gonna talk about today. And so what you see here on the screen is, this is some initial results from this survey. And you can see that, I was talking to a CDO that I was working with, a major global health insurance provider, and I mentioned some of the initial insight that we're getting back from the survey. It was taken by about 200 CDOs and CIOs across Fortune 1000 companies. And we asked them things like, what are the greatest challenges you were seeing in getting to enterprise adoption? And one of the things she said that stuck with me for this conversation is, she said, for the first time in my career, the technology is ahead of the business. So I'm not sure who to blame anymore, right? The technology is ahead of the business. And really what our problem is getting business adoption. And frankly, her point was that talent was a key inhibitor to their data-driven adoption. And so when you look at the survey, I think a couple of things stood out to us. Number one is 80% of CDOs and CIOs said that driving business growth and value is the top priority. So 80% said that's the top priority of their roles, right? It's not about the data governance. It's not about the technology and the cloud implementation. It's about driving business growth and value creation. So I thought that was a very interesting and insightful response. The second thing that I thought was interesting that we wanted to point out was, CDOs are change agents. And so the overwhelming top skill required for a chief data officer to be successful was change agents with 66%, right? So again, and I think that's going to speak to some of the discussion we're going to have today. And then lastly, the number one challenge to CDO to execute on their data vision is talent. And if you look at that, it's 54% of the respondents said talent was the #1 reason they haven't been successful in executing on their vision. And then followed closely by culture. So talent and culture were the top 1 and 2. And I thought this was interesting too, because it's not highlighting as much on the technology as we used to see 3 years ago. The data governance, the funding mechanisms, they're all still squarely very important, but clearly talent and culture are becoming increasingly important. So we wanted to start with that. You all will get a initial look at the survey if you're part of this audience here. So that's a little bit of a sneak peek now. So now what I'd like to do is ask, again, Mike Maresca, Global Chief Technology Officer. I thought we'd spend just a minute with Mike here and get his perspective. Mike, how do you, if you look at these survey results, how does this feel with you as it relates to Walgreens Boots Alliance?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. And first off, I'm really excited to be here with MIT, Accenture, talking about data-driven reinvention. So thank you for having me. I think from a survey perspective, they're really in line with what I'm seeing here. While I'm not officially WBA's Chief Data Officer, a lot of the functions that a data officer would have around data and the analytics platform, essentially, curating the data to help drive those insights, fall within my organization. And then if I take one step back, one of the things that we're obsessed about here at WBA is our customers, and increasingly we're engaging those customers as we digitize organizations. So accelerating how we digitize, the interaction, the journeys, but also how we operate WBA has been a core focus for us. And as you imagine, and I saw one of the videos leading up to this, the digital connections that happen create that data. And if you're able to leverage that data, and really Walgreens is really 3 businesses. It's a retailer, it's a pharmacy, and it's a healthcare. If we can digitize and actually connect those businesses together, we think that we can actually serve our customers, our patients better. We do really believe that data is at the core of our go forward business strategy. In relation to the survey, it is really all about the data driving kind of business growth, new opportunities, value creation, and really kind of the core tenets of that is the investments that we're already making. That is on platform. Platform is going to be the new the capability that enables not just the technical components, but the data that is on that platform, integrated, single place. That creates agility and for us to drive those insights back to our business, whether it's to operate more effectively or again, to drive better customer or patient outcomes. The other way, and this really kind of requires a change as you start to pivot to be more of a reinvented organization around the data, is how do you partner better with the business? The new ways of working, co-creating kind of additional value. It's not just about store or move, it's about analyzing the data and really engaging the business from discovery through adoption, through outcomes. And finally, there is a cultural pivot that's associated with it as well. And that is, how do you think about data in advance of building capabilities and new experiences so that you can kind of leverage those again for better outcomes for our customers. And that's been especially true throughout the pandemic, where we digitize even more because our footfall in our stores fell, and we had to engage our customers and our patients, and we wanted to be there to serve our communities through that rough time. And how do we use that data, those interactions with them, to drive more the outcomes that we needed. So real excited about the journey we're on, and as it relates to kind of what you're finding through your survey. We're living that every day. It is about being a change agent. It is about the talent. It is about, I think, some of the magic of the data and actually showing a path for how you can actually deliver scaled outcomes. So we're really excited about it. And, that is, we're finding those to be true at WBA.
What I think is cool about working at Walgreens or working with Walgreens is this, your purpose statement is, help people across the world lead happier and healthier lives, right? So when you combine this amazing access to the data, combined with strong leadership, and then the purpose of helping to create happier and healthier lives, I think it's a good recipe for success. Surekha, so nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Would love to talk to you. I know you're very focused on data governance, and I'd love to learn, number one, what you've learned along this journey in sort of establishing a data platform for Walgreens, and then also what have been some of the challenges along the way that you've seen.
Thank you, Mike, and Joe. Thanks for the interesting intro and the question as well. I want to start with actually redefining governance. The term governance is no longer approving, disapproving of what goes into the platform or what goes into the data warehouse and the old school. It is about enabling the business. And because we're building a platform, it is about all data is in fact a valuable asset. It just is that you can't necessarily know the value that a piece of data, a data feed, a piece of information you're getting from a customer has right now, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hold value. It just is a matter of discovering the value. So the aspect of governance has changed somewhat in terms of understanding how you tier the data in terms of the fidelity of the data, whether it is a first party, second party, third party data. It also comes into play in terms of how do you interpret the usage of data to make certain types of decisions. For instance, because we're a HIPAA compliant company, we're not able to leverage our pharmacy data to recommend retail products. The only person that is allowed to do that is the caregiver or the pharmacist, who in fact finds a product that is going to be in line or in alignment with a medication that the patient is taking. So those are the aspects of data governance that come into play. The other thing as well is it is a misnomer that IT understands data and data governance. So a very key part of what we're trying to do is enable self-service and discovery. And the goal of that is to essentially put the onus back on the business that is trained in dealing with PII, PHI data. It is also trained in understanding what is the best outcome that it needs to achieve for the patient or customer at hand. And I'm going to keep switching between patient and customer because we are a retailer that is also led as a pharmacy company. So from a governance perspective, I would see those two as critical differentiators between the old world data warehousing and the new world data platform. The other thing is we also have to be able to govern what is coming into the platform and what is exiting the platform. So an end-to-end traceability is critical. And that is to essentially execute on CCPA rules, where a customer has the right to inform, right to forget, or right for additional information on what a company like Walgreens carries about it. It is also to us be able to enable asks of DEA, for instance, or CDC, in terms of how we're leveraging our patients' data and whether we're compliant in terms of the varieties of resources and personnel that are essentially coming in touch with our data. So a DEA agent might go to a store of ours, for instance, requesting for information on the competency levels of who is handling the patient data. Or they might want to come back with a question on what exactly was the way in which the data was dispensed to the patient. How did we discriminate between a caregiver of the patient versus the patient themselves? Those are the kinds of things that fall into the purview of governance, and they are fundamental to how we look at data, because it is about how we enable the front line of Walgreens pharmacists or our customer.
Yeah, thank you, Surekha. I think spot on. Data governance is a little bit of a legacy term, and it's all about how do you drive business insights with the data that you do have. And we're increasingly seeing that it's more about those critical data elements, right? And so shrinking that problem set of data elements that actually matter to move the business is increasingly important. Mike, I'd be curious, you just got a new CEO, Roz Brewer from Starbucks. I believe she joined just a few months ago in March. And one of the things that we've talked to our clients a lot about is how do you get the C-suite buy-in, right? So how do you get the buy-in across the C-suite, not only from the investment perspective, but actually get the true buy-in to really change the organization to become data-driven?
Yeah, it's amazing time since Roz joined WBA in March. She's been undergoing an end-to-end review of our detailed long-range business plans across the company. And it's been amazing to engage with her. I personally am very excited about her leadership. I think she comes in with a strong focus on certainly digitalization of our company, which pre-existed her, but she's continuing to accelerate and find new ways, but also that customer obsession that she brings with her from Starbucks in her previous roles. I personally had an opportunity to work with Roz just recently. Was part of our 3-year planning, and I think she set the goal of we need to be best in class in terms of how we manage data. And I think what Surekha was saying in terms of trust. We have very sensitive data that our customers and our patients give us on a daily basis, and it's a lot of data. If you think about it, I think you referenced the Walgreens component of our business. WBA is a global company. It is close to 19,000 stores operating 25 countries. It's got 4 distinct business units, Walgreens being the one that's here in the US, and probably certainly the largest. But what scale? And if we already think we're a digital business, but both in terms of how we digitize our own processes, but that interaction with the customer, we have to do that with trust and care. And she's very focused on the outcome customer and the patient, right? So that health and wellness mission statement that I think you even quoted, Joe, is top of mind for her. So she's very focused on accelerating how we run as a digital company, and also how we drive the kind of the better outcomes for our customers and patients. And I think she's very aware from her days at Starbucks that data is at the center of that. So it's not a hard sell if you want to talk about it in terms of selling. It is in many cases it's about providing a pathway, a logical sequence of steps, delivering value early. Even if it's small, quick wins, and making sure that the business is at the table with you, co-creating and informing the process of how we drive that insight and better value out of better outcomes out of our data. So, but if you put the customer at the center, it kind of makes it a lot easier. So, Roz has been a big champion of that, and I'm excited to see the next few steps that we take together with her as our CEO.
Yeah, very cool. So Mike and Surekha, we get one thing I wanted to remind the audience is if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat, and we'll take those questions. We want to keep it interactive. One of the questions that we get often is what are the biggest sort of lessons learned that you've had in your data analytics journey, and then so how do you overcome those in your current roles?
Surekha, you want to take this one?
Sure. So some of the critical things that we are finding is we looked at it as a migration effort, but really it's about value creation. It's understanding and working very closely with the business in what they define as value add, not what IT defines as value add. It is very critical to partner with the business to understand where within their landscape of various functions that they're executing, where they see data and how they see data as value adds for that particular use case. And I'll give you a case in point. So when we're looking at pharmacy, for instance, you do have descriptive analytics use cases. There is no reason to discount them. There is strategic decisions that are made on reports, dashboards. There are decisions that are made just looking at the data in the historic sense. That doesn't preclude that area from exploring predictive analytics. That doesn't exclude that area from exploring prescriptive. And so to stereotype a business area as one or the other would be one of the critical mistakes you tend to make. It is use case driven. It is what specific value or value proposition or outcome that the business is seeking for that particular sliver of use case. Medical adherence, for instance, is a very, very important aspect of who we are. The idea is to have maintenance drugs essentially be adhered to by the patient in such a way that episodic events like to an ER or an emergency procedure are avoided. And in a lot of cases, there is social determinants of health, another piece of data that you could always hit up against the medical adherence and the medical condition of the patient to determine whether or not this patient will adhere to the medication, the maintenance drugs, for instance, diabetes, high blood pressure, cholesterol. If you are working closely with the business, it is very clear to see that in that particular use case, in specific medical conditions, predictive analytics is a very, very important part of their data analytics journey. If you're working with marketing, obviously, that is ensuring that the right health campaigns are being made available to different patients at the right time or their caregivers, then you know that predictive analytics play a very, very important role. On the other hand, there is also the lesson that we've learned that consolidation of data does not mean consolidation of data consumption tools. So this was another mistake we made. Beyond characterizing a business area as a stereotype of one or the other type of analytics, it is to try and assume that the entire business area or all the business users within an area would like to just go on to one type of tool, Tableau, Power BI, or SaaS, or they're able to jump onto one particular type of user experience. Again, it is use case driven and it is identified by the business in terms of the specific outcome that they choose to give for the patient or the customer. So if you could avoid those two faux pas, essentially characterizing an entire business area as one or the other type of analytics usage, or try to essentially avoid characterizing all consumption as one type, I think you're doing pretty good. Listen to your business. They kind of know what they're doing is, in a nutshell, what I would say.
I mean, to add to that, I mean, I think what we learned as part of this early journey that we're on is that sometimes innovating with the basics is what the business needs, right? So the descriptive reporting, which is oftentimes required to run a large supply chain like WBA has, is important. And many times that data was not automated, locked in silos, and not available to people that are making decisions. And that's even before you get into any prescriptive or predictive type of analytics that you'd anticipate in the supply chain area. I also think, Joe, one of the bigger challenges is upping I call it the data IQ. I don't claim any that's not an original term by me, but the data IQ of the entire organization. That's about that cultural shift. Raising the IQ of the entire organization in terms of how they can think about data at the outset with the end in mind, right? So as you're designing that business process or that system, and you want to anticipate using data to reinforce decisions or make decisions, I should say, having kind of the forethought to build that with the end in mind, or with that as a critical part of the capability, is important as well as how to I would say as you think about talent has been a big challenge for us as well. I think it's talent is an issue for everybody. So I think it's a universal challenge. So we're making progress, making great progress. There are some early bumps, early lessons learned. So it's good to share that with this group.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Surekha. Both what you said and Mike said actually is a subject or question that we had. We often talk about a dual velocity approach, right? When you're talking about data-driven transformation. And what we mean by that is there's this foundational items that you have to get right. A lot of that's actually powered by cloud and getting the cloud data and AI as a foundational enabler. And that's sort of the first velocity. But in parallel, you need to figure out how to do that while delivering value, right? And so how do you deliver value, whether it's around delivering value on customer experience and that revenue increase you're going to see, or delivering value on deploying capital and expense dollars more effectively, or delivering value on helping to innovate around new products and services. That dual velocity approach is really important to gain the momentum across the organization you need. So Mike, you hit on a topic that I know it has been pinged in the chat, and also it's a question that we were planning to address today directly, which is talent, right? There is a war on talent like I have never seen, right? And I think all of us on the phone likely have seen that heat up over the last, I would say 12 months to 18 months in particular, but even prior to that, talent for what I would call AI strategists, right? Those people that sit at the intersection of sort of the business and technology, talent for data engineers, talent for data scientists, right? And sort of this war on talent is broad, and it's hit all sectors. It's hit Fortune 500 companies like Walgreens, Fortune 50 companies. It's also hit consulting companies like Accenture, and it's in, of course, the startup community as well. And the FANGs are seeing the same war on talent. So Mike, I would be curious, how are you thinking about recruiting and attracting and then retaining that talent at Walgreens?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly can identify with the challenge. I think we all can. I mean, the demands in strategy, science, engineering, just general data management, having the right skills within your organization is critical in order to making your overall strategy a reality. In the past few months, before I get to the recruiting point, we like to talk about investing in our own people that are here. And this is, we've created this concept called an IT Academy, which is a strategic partnership with Pluralsight as well as Global Knowledge. They're both leading providers of IT technical content, certified training, reskill, upskill. We're very passionate about our employees, our team members, and helping them make the pivot to a data-driven company. One kind of thrives off driving value on data was certainly very important to us. If you combine that with a strategic partnership with Microsoft and their skills program, I think we're doing what's right for our employees, our team members, and helping them kind of pivot to this new reality that we're in. From a recruiting standpoint, you can imagine, I mean, we can all identify this is a very competitive space. We're working very closely with HR and make sure, and other leaders to ensure we're bringing the right talent. And a lot of that is being very clear, talking about innovation. I think innovation is very much a magnet for talent. And if you've seen it, if you've seen me out there publicly speaking, I like to come to forums like this today is to actually highlight the innovative things that we're doing and some of the things that you identified and some of the things that we talked about, Surekha. And really connecting it to our mission statement. I think people get really excited about our mission statement, and there's a number of ways that we can help drive that, and data is so part of it. So I think it's taking care of our team members. It's trying to address the right talent, connecting innovation with the outcomes around health and wellness. It's something that really resonates as we not only seek to retain talent, but also attract new talent in this space. So there's not one kind of magic bullet for this, so to speak. But I think that's our formula that's working quite well.
Very cool. How about you, Surekha? How are you attracting and retaining talent as part of your team?
It's been a challenge, but I think two critical things that always help. First, being able to, like Mike said, be clear about the mission statement when you're talking, whether internally or to the larger community to continue to talk about how the mission statement, and if you are passionate about data and analytics and cloud engineering, how you're able to actually make this a healthier and happier place. And in the times of COVID, that really resonates. And I can actually see a lot of my team members and even a lot of our SI partners really being able to resonate with some of the things that we as a company do. A data point that is very critical is we have 9,000 plus doors, and sometimes our pharmacists are the only person that is a healthcare professional in certain communities.
We have 19,000, Surekha, I remember.
Yeah.
Global.
Yeah.
9,000
exactly.
in the US.
That's exactly right. So the mission of the company, but more importantly, the reality of the fact that in a lot of these communities, we are in fact the only healthcare provider in the community. That's a very humbling fact. It's a very it's a mission statement that you don't have to work very hard to sell in the times of COVID. But also, I think having leaders go out there and be able to talk about Walgreens is not just as a pharmacy company, but a technology innovator. I think that's another critical thing, that now you've connected the dots between technology leadership as well as the mission, right? So that's it's been hard, but it's an easier sell when you combine it with your mission statement.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mike, you were saying.
No, I was agreeing with you. I mean, there's a statistic that I like to repeat. I think within the U.S., where we have roughly about 9,300 stores, I think 80% of the population in the U.S. is within 5 miles of a Walgreens store. That presence in our community, that mission statement that Surekha talked about, the ability for us to serve our customers and patients, certainly throughout the pandemic, was important to us. And I think that starts to speak to kind of the impact that we can have broadly if we continue with this business strategy, and again we kind of use data and some of the things that we discussed today to advance health and wellness. So just kind of reinforcing what you said. Thanks, Surekha.
Yeah, I agree that concept of purposeful innovation is something we're seeing becoming increasingly important for especially that next generation of talent. So I think Walgreens is well positioned in that regard, and we're finding more and more companies are trying to figure out what their brand and their purpose is that's going to hopefully do good for the world. So I see we do have a question that we got from the chat. So Mike, this is probably a good one for you. What suggestion do you have when the business doesn't really know what they want or need, right? This makes it challenging to provide value to the stakeholders that they can't explain.
Well, I think that evangelist role, I think remind me, Joe, I think that was part of your survey. There was an evangelist. I really identified that with that. This is, in many cases, you walk into a business meeting metaphorically and you say, okay, what do you want? And they'll reference a report, but you have to often have to co-invent with them and bring them ideas. Is that anomaly detection algorithm that you created here, is that something that you can help them explore in their space, whether it be monitoring expense reports for anomalies or bank fraud or things like that? Those are examples where, being an evangelist and going out there and kind of promoting these ideas, you can't be afraid to, there's a failure rate, right? There's, some of those ideas just don't resonate, but you have to kind of lean into the business. I think Surekha said it well. This isn't just an IT function anymore. It's a business function, business-led function. So you have to think of yourself as a business leader and use IT to drive those business outcomes. And many times business doesn't know what it wants. It just hasn't thought that far ahead. So you need an evangelist role within your organization that is going to seek out and look for those innovation opportunities. And what we've been doing recently, as we've kind of scaled into this organization, is we've created these what we call these innovation challenges, right? In some respects you call them hackathons, but it's a little bit of a different flavor of let's put 10 ideas on a table and debate those. and we actually, turn off our calendars for a while and shut our laptops, and we've been trying to drive some interesting ideas, and then we're trying to kind of pivot how we deliver and make decisions so that we can actually figure out how we move to proof of value quick. And then if there is some value there, we have the business at the table, and they can help champion it in terms of how we invest and fund it and ultimately scale it out. It's still early days. I think we've got one or two kind of successes out of that innovation engine kind of room, if you want to call it that. But I think it's that evangelist role, a bit of a methodology around it, and just kind of that innovative energy that you got to apply to it in order to drive those results. So I think I can really identify the question because I've been there. You often are kind of staring across the table and say, what do you want? I don't know what I want. You got to lean in and create, and bring that passion with you. And if you create the right collaboration kind of a dynamic, you'll get there.
Yeah, I agree, Mike. I mean, I can tell you that when we've seen these, and back to this question around how do you drive this value, I think the first thing is you've got to, everybody's got to understand across the organization that there is no set playbook, right, for most of what we're talking about today. These data and analytics initiatives, especially the more forward-thinking ones, we all have to accept that there will be mistakes made, right? And the key is going to be that we work with transparency and authenticity back and forth with business and IT and finance and HR and all the stakeholders involved, the ecosystem partners, right? So that's kind of number one. Secondly, I would argue that what we've seen be successful is actually having both the business and IT on board at the same time. And that's basic, and that's likely something we've all sort of talked about, for the majority of our careers. But where we see some of these data analytics initiatives fail is either IT is leading without the business, right? And there wasn't value attached to it along the way, and the business doesn't know what the value is at the end of the day, or business is leading without IT and there's not the right technology support. So sitting at that intersection point, sort of that glue between business and IT, as Mike said, sort of that translator sort of glue role is really important. And then lastly, what I think is really important for this question is that talent question. And it all sort of circles back around talent and getting the right talent, not only in the IT, whatever we want to call it, the data and analytics organization, wherever that may sit in the organization, but also that talent needs to be rotated into those business sort of hub and spokes in some cases. There needs to be training programs like Mike talked about, data literacy programs, we sometimes call them, so those business stakeholders can leverage those insights. But that talent, both recruiting, but also that reskilling of the existing talent is super, super critical.
Yeah, I mean, just to add a little bit more to the dialogue, we talked about Data-IQ earlier. Some of those, sometimes they form the lunch and learns, inviting the business and talk about use cases, highlighting, and that creates that intellectual connection with their space and potential for them to come back to you with ideas. The other thing is, this is more cultural. WBA is a bit of a conservative culture. You can't be afraid to fail, because it's not about strictly define my requirements, do the design, build it, test it, deploy it, done. Sometimes hypotheses don't work. And, I've been in a situation where, hey, we had this hypothesis, it didn't prove out, we didn't get to prove a value. I was like, okay, good, that's success. What's the next idea? So, in a culture that potentially has, saw that as a failure point, it's actually looked at that as a success point and just move into the next thing. Those are, I think, two other aspects that are important to, to answer the question overall.
Yep, and then Surekha, it looks like we got another question. Was your data largely architected for analytics, or was there a large cost and effort to rebuild the foundation for the future of innovation and to create business value? What do you think?
So I think it's a mix of all three things, right? You can't realize one versus the other. Our foundational effort was to consolidate the data, because it was very clear that what was happening was data was a byproduct of a lot of siloed applications, and it was essentially always onboarded with the purpose of one use case in mind. So the concept that we brought to the table was to be able to stitch data across domains. And that's not always going to be something that would have been a natural fit for analyses, but it is a key driver for analytics. And I differentiate between analyses in the old school world where people are essentially trying to perform analyses for the purpose of a report or for trying to create a dashboard, whereas analytics requires that you are looking at it cross-domain. You have your store information connected with the customer information, connected with the inventory positions, connected with your supply chain in order to be able to do a simple use case like working capital optimization. And if you did not connect the dots and stitch those data sets, which was a fundamental capability that we're bringing into the platform world, you end up with very siloed visions of where you spend your expensive, very, very important working capital. The other thing that I think we did was to invest in the foundation around specific high-value use cases. We were able to prove that small investments in the platform, such as investing in a data quality tool or investing in a data cataloging lineage tool, or to bring in experts that may have had experience from other domains where data degrees of isolation were at play. Those investments were valuable investments, not just for the use case, but for the platform. But the high value use case could easily cover for some of the costs. So that's kind of how you negotiate and build out a platform for the enterprise while still delivering value. And obviously along the way, you need to bring your business along and your executives along, because you're able to prove the value proposition, not around just a use case, but also why investing in data is a dividend that pays off always.
Yeah, great points. Another question, how do you even define the right talent? You know, I've found the aptitude to understand data is incredibly hard to define or find. You know, I'll start this one, and then Mike and Surekha, I'd love for you to chime in. This is a common question we're seeing, which is in many ways the HR organizations that are set up in all of our organizations traditionally have not had to recruit this talent either, right? So in many ways, what we've found works for particular clients is you have to invite those HR organizations into the discussions with you, right? Either they can be part of the discussions with the business or part of the discussions with IT, and really help to get them up to speed on exactly what's needed from a business perspective or IT perspective. And the minute the HR organizations can understand how to recruit and attract and retain that particular talent set, the better off everybody is. And so it used to be that in some, a few years ago, we would see sort of the business and IT and HR organizations operate in silos as they're recruiting talent. What we see work really well is that talent is now sort of everybody's working collaboratively across those organizations to get access to the right talent. The second part of the answer I would say is, we've seen a lot more interest in both acquisition of talent. So that means literally like buying companies. We've seen some companies like McDonald's, like Walmart, actually go and acquire companies in the data and analytics space. And that's one way to get talent faster, right? We've traditionally seen that in the cloud providers and FANGs and consulting firms, but now we're seeing it across industries. We're seeing also renting talent. So being able to rent from third-party contractors is becoming increasingly important. And then of course, building it from the inside. Now building it from the inside takes time. And that's why those other two options sometimes are a little bit quicker. But I'd be curious, Mike and Surekha at Walgreens, how are you defining who the right talent is and making sure that your HR organizations understand how to go get that talent?
Well, I think we're still on that journey, as most people are, most companies are. It is a collaboration with HR. And as you might guess, an organization's got roots in retail. They have a much different idea on talent, cost points, and you get to comp as well, and really kind of recruiting for these higher end, more strategic IT roles has been kind of a reset in terms of how we attract them, both from a comp perspective, et cetera. And I see our HR department doing very well in terms of helping us do that. And the business leaders have to be involved in that, because it's finding that intersection of, a very fantastic HR department, but with insight into a changing kind of labor market, and kind of coming together to define what the kind of the right talent is. And I think we focused on the core roles around strategy, around engineering. You know, you have to think about it from a blended kind of team, and oftentimes the line between business and IT is blurred. I actually reject the kind of notion this is an IT function. Certainly there are IT roles within the function, but this is a you know, combined data, you know, data, business, and IT capability that comes together and drives the strategy. You know, like anything, talent is probably more cooking than it is baking. There's not an exact blueprint for it. There are some, I think, fundamental principles around, you know, drive with innovation, core roles, like I said before, the right compensation level, but also connecting to the company mission statement has allowed us to kind of attack, I think attract the right talent. So, you know, that it's not easy. You know, I don't think there's any one formula for it. What's next?
Agreed. We got one more question here. What did the data analytics and AI maturity look like for the organization? So I don't know, Surekha, if you want to take a cut at that.
Yeah, I think again, it's a little bit about data culture, right? Making data awareness, hyper awareness, in fact, of data part of your DNA. And this time I mean genetic makeup, not data and analytics. The maturity is when you have a platform that is an enabler of innovation, and we are able to connect between the business, the data, and the outcomes that we can drive with data. So that's one way of looking at it, enabling self-service from a discovery perspective, enabling the business to drive data level innovations in terms of coming up with ideas on potentially partners, you know, third-party data acquisition partners that we could either work with or share our data with, being able to look at how we would be connecting the dots between the analytics, the recommendations, and the predictive capabilities of an algorithm, and connecting it all the way into a business process. So somebody like a pharmacist or a call center person is enabled with recommendations right in the tool that they're using to serve the customer or the patient. So there's different lenses you can look at maturing the usage of your data. And it really depends on where that specific business process is in the journey, where the people that are executing the business process are in their journey. But it's a little bit of a combination of all those things that I talked about, because different types of opportunities will show up. And if you can bring the culture of capturing data awareness into your general population, frontline workers, they will become the people that are going to give you ideas about where to bring data, where to seek data from. They almost get to a point where in their mindset, just like they're not going to let an opportunity pass them by in terms of serving a patient or being able to sell a product to a customer, they are not going to let an opportunity pass by in terms of capturing data. And so now your maturity becomes, how do you make data acquisition part of your general culture, and what you are able to do when you get to that point, because you are able to get to a hyper-aware state in terms of how data becomes truly an enterprise asset. I don't know if that makes sense, but.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. You know, one of the other questions that we have gotten is, you know, how do you know if somebody's going to be successful in their data and analytics journey, especially when we're talking about scale? And, you know, I can I can say from an Accenture perspective, we work with clients across the world in multiple industries, and there's really three things that we look for that would help tell us whether or not they're going to be successful. Number one is a commitment, right, from their CEO and their C-level that data and analytics is an important component of their growth journey. So that's number one. Number two is we look for sort of that trusted relationship. So do they trust us? Do we trust them to be successful, right? And I think that trust goes across business and IT and HR and all these functions that we're talking about today. So that would help indicate whether or not somebody's going to be successful in their journey. And the last one that I would highlight is transparency. And so you've heard a lot of discussion today around some of the lessons learned. And during each of those lessons learned, that the idea is that if we're transparent with each other, whether it's a business lesson learned or IT lesson learned or HR or finance or an ecosystem partner lesson learned, if we're transparent and we sort of work to resolution versus pointing figures, then usually that results in a much better outcome. And if you continue that cycle of commitment, trust, and transparency, usually you will have a successful data analytics journey. Now, there may be bumps along the way. There will be bumps along the way, right? But those three things are super critical. I've had the pleasure of working with the Walgreens team here today, and I can tell you they've got all three of those, and they've got good, strong leadership in those 19,000 stores, as Mike mentioned, globally, and the loyalty customers that they have and the data that they have. And they've got the C-level commitment. And so they have all those critical success factors that helps position Walgreens to be super successful, not to mention their really interesting purpose statement to help create a better world for customers and better, healthier lives, which I think is super fascinating. So if Mike, Surekha, I don't see, there's one more question that came in. Let's get this one question here. Okay, so Mike, curious to hear your perspective around sharing of talent across an organization. What are some ways that you have matured beyond siloed approaches and pivoted to more of a hub and spoke shared services model? That is a good question.
There's probably a couple of dimensions that in terms of how we're maturing, we're actually starting to think of data and analytics as products. So really kind of developing a strong product management mindset. And we're doing that within a hub and spoke model. I've used the term we're going to centralize to build that much muscle. That's where we're at in our journey. We're starting to centralize those key roles. And I like to say, it's not that we're going to be the one-stop shop for data and analytics. I believe in terms of data and scale and certainly innovation across the organization in the hub, but innovation at the edge or in spoke. So we work very collaboratively across, centralizing those roles, scale the functions, the ways of working. There are analytics functions that are deeply embedded within our business that we look to actually as them as customers, right? So we believe that very much in the self-service kind of agenda, right? IT should be the bottleneck. So we are adopting hub and spoke to mature into that data-driven organization. We're approaching with more of a project-oriented mindset. And certainly, I think elements of the question talk about how do we have a methodology around kind of agile proof of value? Yes, we do, and we are starting to mature that as a methodology. We aren't quite there yet. I don't think you ever are. You're constantly evolving your approach and your technique as things change, as your business change. So we're on that journey, but I think we're starting to pick up a huge momentum. And that's so critical to our business strategy. So I'm quite excited about the next few steps, and the steps we've already taken, but the next few steps as we get into our next fiscal year. There's some exciting things that we're working on. And, like I said, the momentum that we have with the business, I think is compelling.
Yeah, very good. I would ask Mike and Surekha, why don't we close with just sort of one key takeaway you want for the audience, and then we'll make it a wrap. From my perspective, I tell the audience, we live in a incredibly exciting time. I mean, AI and data and analytics is becoming increasingly important, and it's like nothing we've ever seen in our lifetimes. And so I think that we should all just continue to learn and grow together, and continue to keep the transparency alive. And just remember that as we're building these data and AI solutions, we didn't talk a lot about it today, but this idea of responsible AI and making sure there's not ethical bias in some of those data sets is becoming increasingly important. So I'll leave the audience with that, and Mike and Surekha.
I think that's well said. Certainly the responsible AI but also I think what we talked about, earlier in the discussion and throughout, and that is focus on the right strategy. This is key. This is the new fuel for the digital enterprise, data and analytics. It's about talent, so attracting the right talent, and it's about kind of driving that innovation and finding those new ways of working with the business and trying to not be afraid to fail. So I think that's something we talked about throughout, and that's what I'd hope the audience would take away from this. Surekha.
Thank you, Mike and Joe. I would say, because this is as much about data and analytics as it is about the platform, make sure you automate as much as possible so you relieve your talent from having to do the drudgery of maintaining a platform and move them to value add capabilities. And at all points, look at data as the beginning of the journey, not the end of the journey. Always look at data, information, knowledge, and cycle right back, because it's a continuous learning process, as you pointed out, Joe. But to look at data as the end all be all and not make it to the information and knowledge and then cycle right back with new data acquisition opportunities is going to be where at some point you'll end up hitting the plateau. So if you want to keep it exciting for yourself, your talent, and your team members, your customers, I think you need to constantly evolve.
Yeah, thank you so much. So Mike and Surekha, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure to host you. And Derek and MIT Institute, thank you for having us. We appreciate the time today. If there's any other questions, feel free to email or call or contact us as well. Derek, back over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. And thanks also to Surekha and Mike. Well said in terms of the key takeaways. Some stimulating thoughts there, and thanks for sharing your experience. That's really what this symposium is all about, is all of us kind of pooling our ideas and saying, hey, this is what's working for us, this is what's not working for us, being open and honest about stuff that's really taking root in our organizations and helping us to move forward. So again, thanks very much for your participation and your candor on these topics, and all the best of luck as you go forward. We'll be excited to see the next leg of your journey maybe next year.